Dr. Peter Mbah, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for granting us this interview.
Thank you very much for having me.
How has it been since the last couple of months? You've been, going around campaigning. What is it that you are beginning to discover in your state that you didn't know before now?
A very interesting question. I Once the ban on election campaign activities was lifted on the 12th of October 2022, on the 13th, which is the next day, we immediately unveiled our manifesto to Ndi Enugu. And one of the things we did immediately after that unveiling was to also embark on town hall meetings across all the development centers. I was told in the course of my visit that this was the first time in the history of the state a governorship candidate would embark on such town hall meeting with the grassroots, because it was quite an eye opener for us, because we got to engage with the grassroots. We got to find out from them what their pain points were and still are. And we also interacted with them to know those critical areas that we needed urgent interventions. And so we ascertained that. But another thing we did was to share with them our vision, to share with them the mission we have when we secure their mandates. We shared with them how we intend to revamp the agriculture sector, how we intend to migrate the things we're doing in that space from the manual means that we use today to a mechanized, and even deploying technology in the agriculture sector. So strategic programs like the special agro-allied processing zones will be created. The technology for agricultural system transformation in Enugu State would also be introduced. These are all very exciting programs for them, because what we believe that our current production level in the agriculture sector is suboptimal, and we need to elevate the standard there. In sharing our dream with them and in talking to them about how we intend to grow our economy from $4.4 billion to $30 billion, naturally we had some doubters. We had some naysayers, which was understandable, because if one did a trend analysis or looked at the pattern of growth over the last, let's say, 24 years, you would probably doubt how on earth are you able to do that if we have only added maybe $300 million in the last 16 years to our GDP. How do you want to add $25.5 million in the next 8 years? So the only way we could do that is disrupting the status quo. We explain to them how we intend to deploy disruptive innovation to disrupt our current revenue model, which is, obviously, we believe that the current revenue model has lived or served out its maximum potentials, and that it's peaked, frankly, that if we do not do things differently, we're not able to optimally intervene in all the critical sectors. How do you construct 10,000 kilometers of roads, which is basically what we need really if we have to build the feeder roads to this uh, agriculture community that we're looking at unlocking the economy? How do you build access roads to your farmland? Now, the only way to do that is generate revenue, revenue, revenue. So part of the things we want to do in our revenue model is, first of all, look inwards. We know we're blessed with huge mineral and energy resources. So what we intend to do over the years, those assets have laid dormant. We've not done anything about them. So, and we've been, relaxed, because we've adopted the approach of going to Abuja at the end of the month to collect federation account. So for me, I refer to that as a rent-seeking approach to revenue, where you go at the end of the month, collect rent, and come back, spend it, end of another month. So what it means is we've not been proactive in the way we address or we harness those assets we have sitting on the ground. Enugu is blessed with oil and gas assets, huge gas deposits sitting under our ground. In fact, Enugu is that state where people may be trying to drill borehole in their compound, and before you know it, they've ruptured a gas field, and we've had experience of that here in Enugu. So we're sitting on a huge gas assets. We have to begin to explore those assets and get them into productive states. We also have other mineral resources. We have gypsum, we have limestone, we have glass sand, we have ironstone, we have clay minerals, we have, a huge mineral resources that we've not explored, so we intend to explore that. But above all is our mission statement, which speaks to making sure that Enugu State becomes the most attractive state for investors, for businesses, for living and tourism. Now, how do you achieve that? Businesses are not Father Christmas. They want to come to an environment that is friendly. They want to come to an environment where it's easy for them to transact, where they would spend little or no time in dealing with external factors like regulation, government, and the rest of it. So because I have a background that is business and entrepreneurship, I'm easily able to understand the plights of business owners. I'm easily able to de-risk the investment flow. So what we want to actually do in Enugu State is to launch an industrial revolution, attract businesses to Enugu. In the agriculture sector, we're also going to do a lot of things that would generate a lot of agro-allied industrialization, because the setting up of the special agro-allied processing zone indeed is going to only be serviced if we increase our production level. So our current production rate is hardly able to secure or guarantee us food. So, but we're already looking beyond just food security. We're looking at basically making sure we produce more than what we need and then begin to process and package and export those products. So yes, there are a lot of things we'll do differently. So what it means is that we're going to have to move the Enugu State economy from being a public sector economy to a private sector driven economy.
Now, considering that PDP has been in power in this state since over close to 24 years now, since 1999, if you are going to do all these things that you just outlined now, one would then wonder, what has your party been doing all these years? Why are these things not implemented or followed through?
No, it's almost like a product or a market. They will all have a life cycle of product and life cycle of a market. In this case, ask, if you will, say, okay, we have a life cycle of a political and economic age, right? This life cycle, as I said, started off at the beginning of the current democratic dispensation, and it's been going on that way. So, and what it has done, and that's why I acknowledge that it has served its use, because it has also helped us to grow marginally and incrementally. Okay, and so if you look at the PDP, for example, you would give credence to the leadership for deeming it necessary to identify people with the background, people with the skills that the demands of this time need in order for them to take the state to the emerging future where great states play. And I think perhaps that may be responsible for our emergence, because you have to acknowledge that what this, if you look at the economic status of the country, I mean, our economy is in a parlor state. We've had to live through 3 recessions in the last 8 years or so. And, we've hardly grown our economy at a rate, at more than 3% rate over those years, right? And our population growth rate is about 4% based on the MBS data. So you could see that, we're actually, if you look at the net growth we're having is actually negative. Okay. Now, so the economy is challenged. So you need people who would be able, and the impact of having these national economic challenges is that it would affect Enugu, because Enugu relies on money from federation accounts to be able to intervene in the critical sector. So, and if you look at the flow of FDI, we're also challenged. FDI, is no longer flowing to the country as it used to, the foreign direct investments and all that. So Enugu is not insulated from all these challenges. So I guess it is in recognition of what this time demands that through our candidature or our candidacy in PDP. And essentially what that means for the party is that the party is interested in people who can come and at least do things differently to be able to deal or address these national and, of course, state economic challenges, so that our revenue, which is why we prefer to refer to our strategy as disruptive, right? Because it's not just doing something incrementally, it's not just doing something better, it is doing something differently. So we have to look at different revenue models, and we have to adopt one that would best serve our people, one that would be able to optimally intervene in this critical sector. Water resources is challenged, the electricity is challenged, education is challenged, healthcare. So for us to optimally intervene across the social services sectors, we have to rejig our revenue model. And in this case, we're disrupting it positively. We're disrupting it through innovation, through creative alternative financing model, through getting into partnership, PPP initiatives, through attracting investors coming in, making it easy for them and attractive for them to also invest. And above all, we're going to begin to explore our dormant assets, transform them into productive assets, and generate huge revenue from them.
So when you talk about the dormant assets, what exactly do you refer to as dormant assets?
So we've just recently, I think as recent as January, been designated as an oil producing state. And this is as a result of an oil asset that is co-owned with Anambra and Kogi, right? And it's OPL 916. It is now OML 155 because it's producing. And that field has a couple of wells that is already in production. From what the impact of that in terms of revenue for the state is that we're going to begin to see the derivation emanating from those productions. So imagine that beyond that 916 asset that is co-owned by Enugu and, of course, these other states, we also still have 914, which is exclusively owned by Enugu and is not being explored and is not producing. So we regard that as a dormant asset. We also have 905, 907. We regard those as dormant assets. We'll be able to mobilize investors who can begin to explore and produce from those assets. Now, our idea is that we can create a lot of value from just producing from a gas asset. One is the byproducts you get from gas, things like fertilizers, and you can even set up plastic industries, from those byproducts. And then, of course, you can process the gas, beyond just producing natural gas. You're able to process it to liquefied petroleum gas, to liquefied natural gas, and all that. So, a whole lot of things that you could do. And then that is in the energy assets. But we don't forget I mentioned mineral resources as well. Enugu has the best grade of coal. I know people would argue, how about the net zero targets the world is aiming to migrate? Is this migration to clean energy, and coal being regarded as not so clean energy? But the good news is that we have the best grade of coal. And we know that countries like Japan and just recently Germany recently had to move a whole city, a whole community where people are living. They had to relocate them from where they live just because they want to start mining coal in that community. So we also know that there is this argument of how to be able to be compensated for warehousing stranded assets. So for those countries, and in some cases subnational, in this case Enugu, where we have huge coal assets, and if we're not mining and we're not making money from it, and the world really wants us to warehouse it, we should be compensated for it. And that we would also push, because we know that argument is going on.
Now, in 2 minutes, are you able to summarize the key highlights and the key points in your manifesto?
So our manifesto is subdivided into three. The first one is where we speak to peace and security. And in talking about peace and security, we have a three-pronged approach to it. First of all is identifying the challenges of insecurity and fragilities. We've identified those challenges as largely driven by unemployment and poverty. So we now have an accelerated program. We have programs that would accelerate our employment rate. So, and a lot of these unemployed young people are people in the rural area. So, in tackling insecurity, part of the things we want to do is to ensure that we unlock our rural economy. And the way to do that is to open up the hideouts, designate those hideouts as special economic zones, which means that rather than have them as hideout and dormant, not being in use, you can actually facilitate them and attract commercial farmers to come and plug into already what is. So most of what puts commercial farmers off is the friction between the community and the business. So, but with the plan we have, we're going to de-risk that friction completely away from commercial farmers. Now, the second segment is inclusive economic development. That inclusive economic development speaks to productive sector, an integrated productive sector. We have the agriculture, which we're no longer referring to as agriculture. We prefer to refer to it as agriculture and agro-ally industrial sector. We have the commerce and industry. We have the ICT infrastructure. We have the energy and mineral resources. We have tourism. We have, of course, housing, lands and housing. So we have the urban renewal. So there are a whole lot of programs we have in the productivity sector. And what we've done is to allot for each productivity sector a certain size of economic activities. For example, in the agriculture sector, we intend to generate a GDP activity of up to $10 billion just from the agriculture sector. And we went in details, which again, you've given me 2 minutes, so I may not be able to exhaust those details. But we went granular in the different ways we hope to achieve that size of economic activities. But also in the commerce and industry, where we hope to empower our young people through enhancing their skills, but above all, also having seed funds, 100 billion naira seed funds that would be, revolving. The idea is for those who have skills but do not have access to finance, will be able to provide them. We also have the innovation incubation centers. This would be a cluster and hubs where our young people would go and immerse themselves in the ICT skills, which we believe is the future that we must provide opportunity for our young people to flourish in. So there are a lot of things we've planned out. And the other one is the sustainable development, the sustainable prosperity. Now, the way to sustain all these things we've talked about is through the structure of good governance. So what does that speak to? It speaks to transparency, accountability, fund traceability, and all that. So we're very heavy on that. We're going to launch an e-governance once we get into power so that our relationship will be so transparent. You're going to see dashboard at the comfort of your home, just using your devices. You're able to assess what government is doing. So you see government programs, government activities, how much has accrued to government over the period, what government is using those funds for. You would also see the impact. So where you have measurable indicators, you see the money we're receiving, what impact the output target, what impact is having in the lives of Ndi Enugu.
Are you saying to Ndi that you're going to run an open governance system where their budget, their expenditure, everything is going to be online?
It is. That's what we've promised them. In fact, we said we're going to execute Citizens Charter. That would be one of the executive orders that I would sign from day one, of my swearing in. I'm going to execute Citizens Charter. That charter will speak to fiscal responsibility, but above all, public financial management system. So we will detail out how we intend to not just even manage the public finance of Ndi Enugu exclusively as government, but how we incorporate the civil society to be part of our budget implementation and monitoring committee. So they also see what we've budgeted over the period and how we are strictly following our planning and budget framework.
Okay. In Enugu as it is today, one of the challenges that this city and state faces is water. In one of your submissions, you alluded that you're going to give Enugu State water in 180 days. Now, for me, that is something short of a miracle. How are you going to do that?
Well, it's not, it's not a miracle. Frankly, provision of water is not rocket science and is not something that you have to be an Einstein to provide. We do have some challenges in the value chain of the water provision. So we've done a comprehensive review of all the streams of water provision. We've looked at the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream. The upstream, which speaks to supply, is not that challenged because we have enough water in Enugu State, fortunately. We have enough sources that can give us water that would match or even exceed our consumption level. So unlike in some cities where people have to travel hundreds of kilometers to get the source of their water, and yet they still don't lack water because they pipe it. For us, we're just talking about sources that are within Enugu, and in most cases, not more than 50 kilometers away from, the city. We have two main water schemes. We have the Uji River Water Scheme, and we have the Ajali Water Scheme. Those two have a designed capacity to generate 120,000 cubics of cubic meters of water on a daily basis. Enugu daily consumption stands today with the population we have at 100,000 cubic meters every day. So from the upstream side of things, we're not so challenged. Now, we're challenged somehow with the midstream when you look at the pushing of that supply through the pipes to the storage. You have challenges with M&E, the mechanical and the electrical side of things, which is not, as I said, difficult. These are things we need to crack within 30 days, 40 days maximum. Some of the pumps may not be able to be procured off the shelf, so we have to order it, which is why we're looking at 6 months. So the lead time for ordering those station pumps and substation pumps may, that's largely why we're giving that timeline. And then, of course, the reticulation, which is the downstream side of things, we would require to replace some of those pipes, the pipes that we currently have, as most of them have actually lived out their design life. And the number of them are asbestos, so we have to replace them with PVC and all that, the valves and all that. So, and of course, interconnecting the new layouts that have been developed that we do not have that do not have sources of water supply. We're going to do all that and easily achievable. And indeed, 6 months, 180 days is a worst case scenario. Our hope is to achieve it much earlier, but we want to be held to account.
So, in holding you to account, what you actually mean is that in 6 months, if elected the governor of Enugu State, every household, at least in the metropolis,
Yes,
should have running water.
water is going to be flowing in all homes in Enugu
Within
in
60 days.
180 days if we secure the mandate of the people.
Okay, another angle I want to take you on your manifesto and also one of your submissions, that you're going to do 10,000 kilometers of road in 8 years. How would you do
So
that? And how
again,
can you refinance?
the length of road we want to do in 8 years, 10,000. I'll tell you something that would that may be funny. When we unveiled our manifesto, the next day I got a call from a friend who informed me that we may have made some typographical errors, and I wondered what in our manifesto. So he said that he thinks I meant to write 1,000 kilometers, because obviously if you look at the length of road that has been built in the last 24 years, it's about 2,400 kilometers of roads. So here you are, have someone tell you that he wants to do 10,000 kilometers of road in 8 years. Obviously, if you look at the current financing model, it's impossible, because even if you were to dedicate the entire revenue Enugu is receiving today to just the road, you are unable to accomplish that length of road in 8 years because the money is simply not there. But that brings me back to the disruptive innovation we're talking about. The sort of revenue Enugu is going to generate is not one that they've witnessed before. It's not one they've seen before. It is even the internally generated revenue today that we're doing around 30 billion naira monthly. We expect to grow that in tenfolds, within the next 2 years because of the sort of economic activities we're going to generate here in Enugu State.
But I mean, how else would you tax the people if you want to increase the
No,
housing?
so we're not going to increase the tax rate. We're just going to expand our tax net. Because of the level of economic activities we are going to generate in Enugu State, we would have more people in our tax net. So it's not a case of increasing the tax rate, but it's a lateral thing, it's a lateral expansion. We're going to have more people captured in our tax net because of the levels of economic activities we do in the state. And some other thing, Enugu has always played host. As Enugu has been, has played consequential roles in the historical and economic development of this country. Even in the early 20s, Enugu played host as the administrative headquarters of the old southern province. And of course, at the twilight of our independence, Enugu was one of the tripods the newly independent Nigeria was built on. And subsequently, we have the old East Central states. Enugu was still again the administrative headquarters. Anambra, Enugu. So we've played consequential roles in economic development. So there's hardly, you cannot talk about economic development in this state without in this country, frankly, without a copious mentioning of Enugu State. So we still see Enugu's role to continue to expand and to look at how we can become that rallying point for the southeastern states and the southeastern market. We prefer to look at Southeast as a market rather than just Enugu State. So our job when we secure the mandate of our people to serve them is to also begin to engage with the other Southeast governors to see how we can build a common market, see how we can interconnect to our various cities so that we can attract the sort of businesses, we want to have in the Southeast. So when a business is doing their business plan, they are not looking at Enugu, Anambra, Imo as cells or pockets of markets, but they're going to be looking at Southeast as a market. And we're going to have all the infrastructure we need to interconnect to our various communities in the Southeast.
Okay, you talked about the regional integration, and which invariably also you touched on galvanizing the leadership within the Southeast here. Now, the question will be, if you talk about the regional integration within the Southeast, are there specific projects you think could be led from Enugu to help drive this galvanization?
Well, I think the critical thing when you want to bring a market together, you want to create some kind of platform where markets, interface, or where you have different-sided markets. You need to make sure that you have multimodal transportation system. So I think that the Southeast is overdue to have a light rail system that interconnects our cities across the different southeastern states. We also should explore other, of course, we have roads, but we must make sure that the roads are well paved and that they are well lighted, that people can, move from Enugu to Onitsha, no matter how late at night, either through the rail system or through the road transport system. And then, again, there's also something that I'd like to point out. You know that recently our young people have refused to be on the fence. They have also recognized that the good governance is the way to go, and that we're going to so there is this push by the Nigerian young people, and whatever you want to call it,
you call it the obedience.
Yes, you want to call it the obedient move. So they are beginning to hold leaders to account, and they have set some kind of standard. And I'm very happy that they want to maintain that standard across board. They don't want to show that they have double standard when it comes to the national government. They set a standard, and of course, when it comes to what we have witnessed recently, is where the obedient movement has, have come to say, look, we want to maintain the same standard we hold people who are leading us at the national level to also at the state level. And that standard they're driven by principles of competence, capacity, and character. And we're glad, because that's the only way this movement can be sustainable. Because if you did anything less than that, then it would only be a matter of time. It will collapse like a pack of cards. So we're glad that this is being done across different states in this country. And we're more than happy to associate with a group that that is interested in competence, in character, and in capacity, because that's what we embody. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peter Mbah. Thank you for having the time to speak to us on these topics.
Thank you very much for having me, Mazi. Thank you.
La 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 la.